Danny Mitchell, welcome to the Real Clear Values podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Danny, you have had several fights. I think is it over 100 fights you've had in your professional fighting career?
Yeah, not all of those are professional, but in total, I have had 107 fights. So
Wow. These aren't in a car park somewhere in Doncaster though, are
no, if I counted them, it'd be more like
they?
200. But yeah, I've had 107 competitive fights. So that's boxing, kickboxing, MMA, bare knuckle boxing, and that's
Yeah,
both amateur and professional. So
right. Wow. So that's a lot of fights in different disciplines as well. So yeah, you've
yeah,
got your MMA background, but you've also got these other strings you bow where you've just focused on BJJ or you've just focused on kickboxing. So a lot of strings to your bow. My expertise in martial arts is about this at the moment. So I started BJJ end of October last year. So I'm a one
nice.
stripe black belt. I think I'm worth more than that to be fair.
Yeah,
I train at Gordo BJJ in Ripon with Pete Hall, but I'm always nagging
yeah.
him. I'm like, when am I going to get another stripe on my belt and
Oh,
all this?
never ask. You should never ask for when you're getting your next stripe because anytime anyone asks me, I just put it back a month every time.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a long time then. I'll be waiting a long time before before I get any more stripes then. But no,
Yeah,
I've got that sort of that high achiever personality where I'm like, yeah, let's crack on and do it. But I gather
yeah,
that BJJ is actually because I did do a bit of judo in Pudsey with Neil Fletcher in Pudsey a few years ago now. But
yeah,
I wasn't into grading or anything then. I was just doing it and just getting into it and learning some throws and all the rest of it. But I gather that judo is a bit different in the sense that it seems like it's much more linear. Like you've got to basically prove that you can do the throws and then you kind of get ticked off. Whereas BJJ is more about can you actually do this thing in the face of reality when you're actually
yeah,
fighting and you actually need to do the thing. That's what I gather. Is that about right?
yeah. It's a lot tougher in that respect, and I'm constantly having this argument, or this internal argument, where you've got people who are maybe they've been training for years, but they're just not getting the results on the mat.
Yeah,
they're just not getting the results in competition, or they're getting stagnant. And then you've got people who come in and they just accelerate super fast.
yeah,
And yeah, it's tough. I've always got this thing in my mind, like, do I promote this person because of the amount of time they've put in,
yeah,
on this journey, or should that only be reserved for the people who are getting the results?
yeah,
So it's kind of a results based martial art, whereas most martial arts, like you say, there's like a curriculum,
yeah.
and if you can demonstrate that curriculum, then you get awarded your next grade. Judo is kind of a mix of the two. So judo's
Mm,
got a nice curriculum. I take my little boy to judo. I think for me, judo is probably the best martial art for kids, I believe,
mm,
just because um, if you take in your kid boxing, kickboxing, anything like with strikes involved, in terms of like anti-bullying, if your kid's getting bullied and it's the classic,
mm.
parent tells his kid, if someone bullies you, you just punch them in the face. That's like the classic story.
Yeah,
But the problem with that is if your kid just starts punching people in the face constantly, they're going to get in trouble.
totally.
I think with judo, it's just about controlling another person, using
Yes.
their strength against them, and just
Yeah.
taking them down. It's almost like a peaceful way to stop a fight. So I really
Yeah.
like that for kids. I think grappling in general, but specifically judo, is a great martial art. So that's what I'm taking my little
Mm,
boy to. And there's a curriculum. He has to learn this throw, this escape, and he gets this belt. And it's very, like you say, it's very linear. But there's also an element of you have to go live against other people, which a
yes.
lot of martial arts lack that still, where it's more like you get a grade based on like a demonstration, like a performance. It's
Hmm.
dance, basically. I was watching a clip of a day of some guy doing like a martial arts performance, and it's basically dancing. It is
Mm.
it is just it's an art in itself, and if that's what you like to do, then that's great. But in terms of uh, usability, I think
Yeah.
judo is very Brazilian jiu-jitsu is probably the best because it just bases everything on, like I say, results. Like, can you, if a 20 stone bloke is on top of you, can you escape? If you
Yeah.
can't, you ain't getting this belt, and that's it. That's kind of
Yeah, and that is a very real question, and I had to find an answer to that question on Monday night when I was down. And the first time it was asked of me, we're in side control, and side control for me is a nightmare. I absolutely hate being in side control, and
yeah,
because my build is like a piece of string, so I'm probably about 82 kilograms, but because I'm tall, my weight is distributed across. And if I'm against someone who's built like a cannonball and I'm like a piece of string, if they get on that right spot on me, it's flipping difficult for me to move
yeah.
them. And there was this one guy, and he's probably about the same height as me, but he's an absolute monster. And the first time I managed to escape, and I felt pretty good about myself. But as more people come through and come through and come through, he came back round. I thought, I'm going to struggle this time. I couldn't do it the second time. I did it the first time, but I was absolutely gassed because, like you say, it's about can you do it? Can you move this person who's so much bigger than you and find the speed, the skill, sometimes just the intuition. Sometimes for me, it's about intuition. It's about just having that little spark that's like something comes into your head and it's like the Matrix almost, where it's so fast that you don't even have time to think about it. You just do it. But it's that I think it's that instinct, and I'm not saying I do that every time by any means. I don't, but it's just getting tuned into that. And I think personally for me, it's about overcoming the fear because I'm more claustrophobic than I thought I was. Certainly since I started doing
Yeah.
BJJ, I realize it's scary being in that position where you've got someone who's an absolute beast, and especially if they're a higher belt than you, they're more skilled than you, and you think, what can I do if someone's full mount on top of me or side control? What can I actually do? I'm stuck, and that feeling of being stuck, that feeling of powerlessness, it's uh, it's a challenge. It's mentally, I feel like I'm getting mentally stronger as a result. So I'm getting used to it. But there's people I look at, I think I don't want to grapple with you. I will grapple with you because I know it's going to make me better physically, mentally, and all the rest of it. But it's not a pleasant experience, shall we say?
No, no, it is. It's about that mental toughness, and I think that's why a lot of people quit jiu-jitsu is because
Yeah,
they've got like a preconception when they come in. They think, yeah, I can look after myself.
yeah,
They've
yeah,
watched
yeah,
they've watched the UFC,
yeah.
and they think, I could get that guy from off the top of me. And they come in
Mm,
and then they feel, I've got a lot of really small guys in the gym. 55 kilos, and they
mm,
they they I sometimes watch them destroy somebody who's
yeah,
90 kilos, and that must, if you're that 90-kilo guy, you've got to make a decision. Then it's like, do I go deeper into this and just
yeah,
be humbled and learn, or do I just say no, this is not for me, and leave? And unfortunately, a lot of people do leave and seek out a martial art that they either stop martial arts altogether, or they seek out a martial art where that confrontation's not happening, so they can go to
yeah,
kickboxing class and hit a few pads and feel good and feel like, yeah, I can actually fight, I'm all right.
yeah.
But I think the ultimate truth is, and this is why jiu-jitsu is so good. It's like the mats don't lie. You get on the mat,
No,
and I mean, I've got the curse of being a black belt. So the problem is, wherever you go in the world, when you put that black belt on the mat,
yeah,
people are going to test you. They are
yeah,
there to test you. And I'm lucky enough to have trained a lot of different places in the world, and it's a great feeling to be able to get on the mat with a black belt you've never met from another country in another country, and be able
mm,
to hold your own with them, or do well with them. Just to be able to do that and be on that level is it's a good feeling. But
yeah,
to get to that point, and I've been humbled even as a black belt. I'll roll with other black belts, and I'll think, wow, there's another level to this.
yeah,
You know, it's, yeah, as a beginner, when I was a white belt, there was like blue and purple were the highest belts that were in England at the time.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It was the Brazilians were black belts, and yeah, now you can find a black belt in any city.
Mm.
There's multiple black belts in Leeds. I've got 12 black belts in my gym.
That's a lot.
Yeah, which is a lot. But yeah, there is levels even to when you get to a black belt, you think, oh, I've completed it. That's it. It's done. But there's multiple levels above that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think I definitely think that BJJ is like a red pill, blue pill sort of situation, kind of going back to the Matrix analogies there, because
yeah,
I think it was Dana White. I saw an interview with Dana White from a while ago where he was saying that until you've actually been on the mat, until you've been in that situation where somebody is on top of you and you're grappling with them, and it's almost like a fight for your life. It's like you or him sort of thing. Until you've been in that situation, you really don't know. You don't know what you're capable of. You don't know how strong you are. You don't know how battle ready you are. And it really is like that. Like you say, I like how you put that, where it doesn't really matter if you're a big hard man or you're big physically. It's about the skill. It's about putting it into practice, and it is about your ego as well. Because I've had to think to myself a few times. Well, I thought I would have been able to take care of that, and I didn't. And then and then on the other side of this, it's like there's a few times where I've put it on somebody. I'm like, yeah, he's been going way longer than me, and I've submitted him 3 times in 5 minutes or whatever. And then it's like, yeah, but you're getting too carried away. You know what I mean? You're not that good. You're not that good. Yeah, you were good in that 5 minutes or whatever, but you've still got loads to learn. So it is one of these things where you learn so much about yourself, but you realize that in reality, what you have in your head as a conception of strength within yourself is not necessarily reflective of reality, because that reality is going to be tested every single time you get onto that mat. So I love it. I mean, I love it and I hate it, right? I say, I tell people about it, and I say to them that I love it and I hate it. It terrifies me and it exhilarates me. I think that's the best way that I can put it, is that it's those two things, and it's those two things sometimes at the same time. Sometimes it's like a yin and yang, but it's one of those things where I just think that I get so much benefit from it that I can't not do it. You know what I mean? It's like even when I'm not in it, and I'm not prolific with it in terms of training. I don't have the time. I'm quite time poor. So, but I said to Pete when I started, I said, look, I'm gonna do. I can do this for 1 week, at least once a week. I can be down in this gym. I'll keep myself right. I'll eat right. I'll sleep right, and I'll do exercise and stuff. But I can be in this gym once a week. If you tell me that that's not enough, then I won't bother. I won't waste anyone's time. But I will be here at least once a week, and that's what I do. But I've noticed that I'm leveling up from doing that. So anyway, enough about that and my little foray so far. I'm more interested in learning about you, because you are a UFC veteran and you have had all of these fights, so many fights in so many different disciplines. So you mentioned about your son getting into judo and into martial arts and looking after himself at school. How did you get into this into the first place? Because you've got a gym now in Leeds, AVT. You're very well established. So how did the story start for you?
um, so when I was a young lad, I was really one of my earliest memories. I think I must have been 6 years old, and I wanted to do boxing. That was like I'd seen it. I remember I had a pair of boxing gloves on. There's a picture of me somewhere as a baby with a nappy on with a pair of boxing gloves on. Um, and yeah, I'd seen boxing. I think I'd seen like an old Muhammad Ali fight I'd watched on TV, and I wanted to do boxing, but my mum and dad at the time didn't want me to do it. They were like, "No, you're not doing boxing." My dad had been forced into having boxing fights. He didn't want to do boxing, and he got made to do it. Um, I believe his dad had just forced him to do it back in the day, just to toughen him up or whatever. And he hated every second of it. So I think he had a bit of a, and my dad had done judo as well. It was a judo brown belt. So he liked that. Well, they never really tried to steer me to that. They just said, no, you can't do boxing. So yeah, I just kind of forgot about it. And when I first actually started martial arts, I was about 10 years old. And at the time, I was into like the WWE, WWF back then was really big. So I was watching that, and we'd all, get in my front garden, and we'd all wrestle with each other. And sometimes it'd get a bit out of hand. And one of the times I remember what one of the kids was wrestling, and one of the kids he got a bust nose. So he went home to his dad, and his dad came over, and his dad owned the local taekwondo school. He was a black belt in taekwondo, and he had a big school just down the road. So he came over, and he's like, you know, you need to stop fighting with each other like this, and you need to learn some discipline and stuff. And it was, it sounds like he was doing a good thing, but it was just a marketing ploy, really. It was just let's get these kids signed up. So what he did is he
All these
gave
kids.
all
He was looking at the numbers, wasn't he? He's
that's
looking at how many kids and multiplying it by the subscription fee or whatever.
the monthly fee, yeah. So he actually gave us all a 30-day free trial of his gym. Now, at the time, I was into like, I remember watching Bruce Lee film. I think I'd watched Enter the Dragon, so I was really into that as well. Like, I really like Bruce Lee. So yeah, I went to this Taekwondo gym. We had 30 days free. So what I did is I trained every day. I thought I am going to milk this for everything it's worth, and I went down, and I absolutely loved it. You know, we're just standing in lines, doing punches, kicks, and yeah, I didn't really know much about martial arts, but at the time I was like, this is amazing. I got my mum and dad to take me every day. Once the month trial was up, a lot of my friends they just left, went, you know, carried on playing football or whatever they wanted to do. But I think my mum and dad then could see that this is, you know, I was really interested in it, and because it's not like boxing, they saw boxing as this rough, brutal sport, whereas Taekwondo it's a bit more of a martial art, you know. So they were like, "Yeah, you can do it." So they signed me up, and that's where I started training. Um, but so then I'm watching like Bruce Lee films. I'm literally buying every martial arts book. I remember every birthday, every Christmas is like a big stack of martial arts books. Um, you know, loads of videos, different martial arts, and I just wanted to learn everything. Like I just wanted. I remember writing notebooks. I'd write techniques down. Like I was obsessed with just learning martial arts. Like any martial art, I'd look through the newspaper. There'd be a Aikido class in the next village. I'd get my dad to take me to Aikido class, whatever. It was just like I just wanted to learn so bad. And then from doing that and traveling around and seeing different things, I saw like kickboxing, then I saw Thai boxing. So it's like I kept seeing the next thing, like, oh no, this is more realistic. This is more like real fighting. I want to do this. And then that progression kept going until I was like in my early teens. I came across UFC 3 on a VHS video at a car boot sale.
That's when it was
So
crazy, wasn't it?
yeah, yeah. So it was no rules. So I remember picking the video up and looking at it, and it said there's no rule, no time limit, no rules, no gloves. And I'm looking at this video, and I felt like I'd found something illegal. Like this can't be real. This must be like an illegal thing, or it's fake. It's like the WWE. It's just all the matches are fake. So I bought it, went home, put it in. You know, obviously the matches aren't fake. And I watched it, and I was like, wow, this is it. This is what I want to do. This is what I've been waiting for. Like this is the dream. Let's train and try and fight in this competition. Um, so then I went. That was UFC 3 that I actually watched, um, and then I went back and I bought UFC 1, UFC 2. I bought as many as I could, and yeah, I just sit and watched them all. And then obviously with Hoist Gracie winning, he won the first UFC, he won the second UFC. He didn't win the third. He got injured by a guy called Chemo, who carried a full size crucifix to the to the cage on his back. Um, but he actually injured Hoist, so he couldn't continue in the tournament. So, but you could see how effective grappling was. So around that time, I'm about 15 years old. That's when I started to really get into grappling, and I almost completely stopped any kind of striking martial art, boxing, kickboxing, because I thought this is it. You know, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Gracie jiu-jitsu at the time. This is the one. This is like the style that beats everything. And that's when
Mm.
I fully got into grappling then. And then
do you still feel
obviously,
like that now? Do you still feel like that now at this side of the journey?
um, I would say now I'm more. I appreciate more the stuff that I did before. So at the time, I had this like epiphany, and it was like everything I've done up to this point is wrong, and now I just need to just do jujitsu. And this ties back to what we were talking about before, and I've seen it a lot of times where people do a martial art. So say they're doing, some kind of weird martial art, some kind of karate system or whatever, and they train it for 20 years. They've got multiple dans on the black belt, and then they come to a Brazilian jiu-jitsu class and they get absolutely destroyed by a beginner. What happens is sometimes they will leave and never come back, and they will just go deeper into their old style, whatever style they came from.
Yeah,
They'll go deeper into that
the
to stay
comfort
away
zone.
from. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or like I've got a guy. Well, I've got multiple people who train with us who've got a similar story, but there's one guy who sticks out, and he'd been doing like a traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu style, very self-defense kind of orientated, and he thought that was legit. He thought this is real fighting, and he'd invested a lot of time and money in that. But then when he came to AVT and trained with us, he sort of realised that what he'd been doing wasn't what he thought it was, and he made the decision there to completely stop that and just concentrate on uh, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and MMA, and that's his reality now. So he's had to. It's sad in a way that you almost have to say goodbye to 20 years of training. But that's kind of where I got to when I'm only a young lad, 16 years old, and I'm thinking everything I've done so far is wrong. But now looking back, there was a lot of good stuff that I took from training different martial arts, and I think there's still a lot. I think there's value in every martial art now. Where I used to say,
Yeah,
no, that's no good. Don't do that. Now I see a value in all martial arts. Like when
mm,
people ask me what martial art should I do, I just say try as many as you want and just do the one that you enjoy, because
yeah,
ultimately it comes down to, as much as we all want to be the best fighters or whatever, I think it comes down to like what do you actually enjoy. If
yeah,
you enjoy throwing some punches and kicks in the air, then do that, because you'll get a benefit out of it. You'll feel confident. You'll get some fitness benefits and stuff like that.
yeah.
But obviously, if you really want to know how to fight or really want to be able to defend yourself, you need to be doing a realistic martial arts. So
Yeah. I think you're right though about the enjoyment side of things. Just simply because if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to keep it up. You're not going to stick with it. It's like my parents tried to get me to learn a musical instrument when I was a kid, and I wouldn't do it
yeah,
for love nor money. They tried me with everything, the trumpet, the piano, you name it, like everything. And I do it a little bit because I had to do, or I was bribed to do it, but it just fell off. And then I did get into music when my mates were playing in bands and they all played guitar and we had a drummer and there was no one to play bass. And then all of a sudden they were like, well, you've done a bit of this bits and bats with music. Why don't you just pick up the bass and play that? And that's how I learned to play the bass. I taught myself to play it because there was
yeah,
an incentive. It was like they were all in this room speaking a different language through music. And I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. I'd like to join in with this. And that's why I did it, because I enjoyed it. There was an incentive there. So I think
yeah,
you're right. I think because you have to be deliberate about it, don't you? Because one of your videos that I saw, I think it was on Instagram, which I thought was really interesting. You're talking about your fighting. I think it might have been one of the more recent bare knuckle fights that you've been doing. And you talk about getting into that flow state. And I know that psychologists and neuroscientists talk about the difference between things like deliberate practice and flow, because there is an antagonism between them, isn't there? Right? You
yeah,
can't be in flow all the time. Like you can't go down to the gym and be learning new techniques or drilling techniques and getting better and always be in a state of flow. There's graft there, isn't there? There's grind. It's not easy to start with. So it's like you've got to earn the right to be able to get into a state of flow. Is that fair to say?
yeah. That's it. You've got to. If you think of flow state as like your instincts, you just it's just your instincts take over and you're not controlling anything anymore. It's just like your body's just doing the work for you, but you have to pre-program it by doing the work in the first place. So you couldn't get like a beginner. He's just in flow state. It don't work like that. But yeah, you have to just put in that hard grind, do the reps, in whatever it might be. Like you were talking about music there, it's the same for that. The same applies to languages. Like I can't speak any other languages. I know little bits of different languages. I'd love to learn a language, and it's the same kind of thing. Like if you could piece together a different language and you could speak that in flow state, you could just it would just naturally roll off the tongue. That is your language flow state, if you like, but you would have
Yeah,
to do the reps of learning to get to that point. So
exactly,
but like you
exactly.
say, same with music, same with you can apply that to like anything, any
Mm,
kind of skill or craft.
yeah,
But yeah, you've just got to get the reps in. That's all
yeah,
it's all it's
yeah.
about.
That's it. Yeah, it's that deliberate practice. So tell us then. So this is interesting because you fight. So your journey, the UFC is part of your journey more or less from the get-go, isn't it? So you're doing this taekwondo. You find
Yeah,
this almost like a fateful occurrence, isn't it? It's almost like this
yeah,
epiphany moment
yeah,
where you find this tape at a car boot sale. You pick that up. You watch. And you're like, whoa, everything's wrong. It's almost like it's almost like a spiritual visitation, isn't it? You're like, whoa, I've had this revelation that it's all
yeah,
wrong. We need to do something else. We need to change course. So what does the road to the UFC look like for you? Because you got to fight in the UFC, which is
yeah,
which is the pinnacle of MMA. Obviously, that's what everybody dreams of doing.
yeah.
And so what did that road to the UFC look like for you?
It was a long road, and it was a lot of ups and downs. I mean, I started my professional career in 2008, and then from there, I think I won my first 8 fights as a pro. When I was a young man, I was like 21, 22 years old, and people were like, "Wow, this guy is, he's an up and comer. Lots of people are talking about me." Um, and then I dropped a couple of losses, and then people stop talking about you. Then it's like, oh no, he didn't live up to the hype. But you've got to think all the way through this. It's basically me and just a bunch of my friends training. Uh, I've got my friends in my cornering me. It's like I did a lot of this just with my own group of people. So yeah, it's been a bit of a mad journey. And then when the UFC call finally came, I'd pretty much given up the quest to be in the UFC. Like I'd wins, losses. I'd started fighting around the world. Before I fought in the UFC, I'd already fought in America. I'd fought in Sweden. I'd fought in all these different places, big shows as well, big arenas. So it was like for me, I'd already done it in a way. Like for me, that was my UFC. Like I'd made it to America. I'd fought on these big events. I'd fought on the undercard of some big names. Um, so yeah, I was like, this is it. This is my end game. I'll just keep doing this until I can't anymore. And then luckily, just a massive sort of string of coincidences just led to this UFC call. And it couldn't have come at a worse time in my life because my dad was diagnosed with cancer during my first fight camp. So he managed to actually get to see me achieve my dream, which was to fight in the UFC. So he actually came and watched me, and then a month later he died, unfortunately, which was before my next fight in the UFC. So yeah, it were a tough time to be like if I could have put that UFC thing on hold and took a year out and then started again, I think it would have been much better. But I didn't think you could really do that at the time with the UFC, so I just had to deal with my situation and fight. So, but I'm sort of I've got no regrets. I look back and I'm proud of what I did with the skills and the team, what I created.
Hmm.
And like I say, my dad got to see me compete in the UFC. So yeah, I'm happy with my career in that respect. Like, I could have done things way differently. I could have left the UK. I could have gone to America, joined one of these big gyms, got
Yeah.
them to manage my career, and maybe I'd still be in the UFC now. Who knows? But yeah, I did it my way, if you
Yeah.
like. I did it the way I wanted to do it.
But that's pretty incredible actually that you did it almost as a DIY camp with a
Yeah,
DIY group of people because like you say in America they have massive gyms. I actually went over back years ago now. I've got some friends in Texas
yeah,
and we went over to Luther's gym in Fort Worth. And
yeah,
that was the first time the first time I actually ever grappled was in Luther's gym. We went for a session, had a roll around there, and I was like, wow, this is really cool, really powerful stuff.
yeah,
But it's a whole thing where there are classes on all the time. There are coaches down there. There's loads of black belts, and it's just properly it's set up really really well for success. So
yeah,
anybody who wants to go there who is serious will go there and they'll basically dedicate their lives to fighting. And you see that on the Ultimate Fighter as well, the reality show that the UFC's got. You see people who just they go absolutely all in on this, and they've got pros training them, pro trainers training them, and everything is on point. So the
yeah,
fact that you even got to the UFC on a DIY job is actually pretty incredible.
yeah. That's it. And now I can use all that experience that I've got. And now AVT is that gym where you can come to my gym and we've got, 10 different coaches, we've got all these people. And yeah, we've got that gym now that can sort of take care of all your needs.
Mm,
But that obviously just comes through all my experience of doing it myself.
yeah.
But we've got a good team now. And one of the best things about the team is at the weekend just gone, we had a few guys fighting. And like one of the guys who was fighting, he made his debut and he won. He's been training for 1 year at AVT, and I've never actually seen him trained him myself, been with him. Like, so that shows now that the gym is like, it's no longer me running this gym. It's like bigger than me now. So literally, there's somebody in the gym who's had a fight, and they've never even been in my class. They've gone through all that training, they've competed and they've won, and that's just through the team that I've built rather than it's nothing to do with me, directly, but it's through the
Yeah.
team that I've built around. So that's pretty cool. That like the gym has outgrown me now. Like I'm just a person who turns up and teaches classes sometimes. You know.
That's incredible though, isn't it? That you've done that from scratch and you've laid the foundations and you've built the house, so to speak. And now other people are living in the house and they're benefiting from being in the house and the sort of the framework, the structure, the protection, the guidance that they get in that particular house. And not many people do something like that. So that's fantastic in itself. And it seems like you've kind of taken that experience that you had in the UFC and you weren't rather than being defeated by that, you've moved on from it. It was like you say, it was an incredibly difficult time of your life. You've moved on from it, but then you've laid the foundations for others to benefit in ways that you weren't able to when you were at the start of your journey. So that's commendable. That's admirable because it's like you say, it's bigger than yourself then, isn't it? So like you're making a contribution to your community, to your world, so to speak, which is just way beyond you. And hopefully it outlasts you as well. Hopefully you've built or you're building an institution that goes on for many, many more years to come, decades even to come.
Yeah, that's it. That's why I didn't want to call the gym like Danny Mitchell's MMA gym or whatever. I wanted it to be something that I could eventually. I mean, right now I'm in a position where right now I can walk away from the gym and the gym will still run as it is without me. So what that's good for me now because I've got time. I'm 37 years old now. I've got one little boy. I can spend time with him now. I can take him training, and I don't have to worry about going to the gym every night. I used to go to the gym in the morning, teach morning classes, and then hang around the gym all day, do some private lessons. Then I teach all the evening classes, then I drive home. And I live in Doncaster. The gym's in Leeds, so that's like 45 minutes there and back. So it's like so I was just constantly out the house and that. So now I've built something that I can walk away from, and I've got my own time to do things I want to do. But that means that when I'm going to the gym, so like I went to the gym yesterday and I taught a class, and it means that when I'm teaching, it's because I want to be there, and it's like I think it makes my classes better because it's not like, oh, I've got to do this again, you know, I've got to teach this class same every day. It's like I can just turn up and say, right, I'm taking classes today, and I can teach them with a bit more passion because I'm there because I want to be there, you know. So it's a little bit different to just working a job, if you like.
Yeah, completely. It makes a massive difference when you're there of your own volition. You don't feel like you have to be there to put food on the table or whatever. So
Yeah,
that's huge. Let's talk about let's switch gears a little bit because I know you still do you're still involved in fighting. You do bare knuckle boxing. Is it BKFC, the
yeah. So my
organization?
last fight was in November, and I fought for the BKFC. Yeah, so that was a bare knuckle boxing fight.
That sounds nuts to me. That really does sound crackers.
Yeah,
I've
it's
still not
not.
got my head around that one.
Yeah, it's not actually as bad as you know. It looks a lot worse than it is. Like people's perception of like bare knuckle fighting.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think it's just like there's just a stigma around it. But yeah, for me, it's just another fight. It weren't any different from any other fight.
Yeah.
It's
It's
just
gained a lot of traction, isn't it, BKFC? Because I know that Conor McGregor's been promoting it at his pub recently, and
yeah,
there's all sorts of people.
he's just sponsored it. I
Yeah,
think what's his new Guinness called, new version of Guinness called, I can't remember, but
is
yeah,
it
he's sponsored it.
Forged or something? Forged, I think that's.
Forged
Yeah,
Irish Stout. So they've just
yeah.
sponsored the BKFC, and then yeah, I think he had it on live in his pub and stuff. So
Mm,
he's getting involved. He'll probably at some point fight for him. I don't know. There's going to be some kind of crossover there, I'm sure.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I think for me, going back to how I got into this with the first UFC. So the first UFC was bare knuckle. Now, when I watched that video, I fell in love with the UFC, the bare knuckle version of it. What we see now, the UFC, and it's great. The UFC is like it's a business, but it's a sport. It's got rules, regulations. It's got
It's gone
athletic
soft.
commissions. Exactly. So what we see is like a sanitized version of the original idea. Now, I've been in the corner for over 1,000 fights. You know, I've had a lot of fights myself. I see fights every week. You know, I'm so desensitized to fights now. Like I'm watching MMA and I don't feel anything. Like I don't feel emotion. You know, it's just normality. Whereas when I watch bare knuckle, because they do bare knuckle MMA now as well. Masvidal's got a promotion called Game Bread, which I've been in talks with recently. So that there could be a chance that I could be one of the first ever fighters from the UK to compete on that. So it's bare knuckle MMA. So when I watch that, that gives me that same feeling as when I first watched the UFC. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like that what I really like.
But there's
Um,
more of a sense, there's more of a danger there, isn't there? There's more of a sense of jeopardy there than
yeah, there's a sense of it, but I don't think it's not really real. You know, it just feels more dangerous.
right.
But what you've got to think is, if you get your hand, yeah, and you wrap it with bandage and zinc oxide tape, so it's like you've basically put a pot on your hand,
Yeah.
and then you get a leather glove, whether it's a boxing glove or an MMA glove, and you put that on and you strap it on. Now you can punch really, really hard
Mm,
without breaking your hand,
hmm.
and you know you can punch somebody again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
Now with bare knuckle, there's nothing. You can tape your wrist, but all this is free.
Mm,
So now, if I punch you as hard as I can, if I get the punch slightly wrong, now my hand's broken,
yeah.
and now I can't punch you again. So it's
you
almost
you've
like
damaged your weapon if you overuse it.
yeah. So there's a little bit of almost pulling your punches a little bit where
Yeah.
if you just swing, you're going to break your hands and you're not going to be able
Yeah.
to fight again. So
Mm,
if you watch the fight back, what I had, I played a really technical game, and even afterwards, my hands were smashed up. But I
mm.
didn't throw that many punches compared to like a boxing fight with gloves on.
Yeah.
So you're getting hit less, and you're getting hit potentially not as hard because you haven't got that constant like thudding of constant punches. It's
Mm.
like you get hit. I got, I think I got hit twice cleanly, and the problem is they do cut you. So I remember I got hit here, and it caused a big, it caused a big cut. Which luckily we had a good cut man, and he sorted that out in the middle of the fight. But
Mm.
yeah, it's more like lacerations, external
Hmm.
bruising and stuff. Whereas I think with big boxing gloves on, I think you get more internal damage.
Mm.
And this is why they actually prove this with head guards. So that if you've noticed in the Olympics now, they don't box with head guards on,
Hmm.
because they prove to the Olympic Committee that having a head guard, the padding of it, actually causes more internal damage
Right.
than just getting hit in your head
Yeah.
as it is. So yeah, so there's a lot to be said about the dangers of like big padded gloves and padded head guards versus just getting hit with a bare knuckle. Like you watch somebody after a bare knuckle fight, they've got cuts and they're bleeding and stuff. But once that heals,
Yeah.
I think that's better than some of the internal damage that a lot of these pro boxers have got.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point, and I'd not properly considered that actually before you mentioned it. But yeah, you're quite right. That there's talking about jeopardy, because there's less jeopardy in throwing a punch when you've got a pair of gloves on your hand. You can just swing for the fences and you can punch as long as you've got energy. Basically, there's no
Yeah,
your hands aren't going to get hurt. But like you say, yeah, you've got to pick your punches if you know because these are your weapons, these are your tools, and if they get damaged or you do your wrist or something, then you're done basically. That's it. You can't block or anything.
yeah,
So this is interesting. So you've still got this. The martial arts connection is still there. It's still strong. It's still very much part of your life. But you can kind of dip into it as and when you feel like. But
yeah,
you've got other strings to your bow as well. Now, one of the reasons why I asked you to talk is because I found it so interesting on your Instagram. You started talking on, I think it's on another podcast, you were talking about religion. You were talking about the parallels between the three Abrahamic faiths. And I was like, what the heck? I'm watching this
yeah.
guy and I'm trying to pick up some hints from my own BJJ game. And then he's talking about the three Abrahamic faiths and all these parallels and about religion and all these other things. You've got a tattoo, haven't you, on your chest, which
Yeah,
says, and if I pronounce this correctly, because I think it's in Latin, Favente Deo Supero, which means
yes,
by God's favor I conquer. So
yes.
there's other things going on there. Tell us about that. How does this interest in religion play out for you? What does it mean to you?
Um, so my interest in that, so the tattoo thing, um, was when my dad actually died. He was cremated, and I always, for some reason, I always wanted to be better. Like I always think I would like to be buried. You know, I want to have like a proper grave and stuff like that. So, um, but my dad wanted to be cremated for whatever reason, so he was cremated. And then you get these ashes, and it's just kind of like this morbid thing where you've just got like ashes laid around the house. You know, what do you do with them? So I thought that I would get a friend of mine who was a tattooist to mix the ashes. We ground the ashes up into like a fine powder, and I tattooed. So Favente Deo Supero is the Mitchell family motto, the family crest. So I had the ashes mixed with ink, and then I had them tattooed into my chest. So that way I don't need to carry a pot of ashes around. I've literally got my dad's ashes tattooed into my body,
That's it.
with the Mitchell family motto. And obviously, like you say, the translation is by God's favor I conquer, which is, you know, I'm a fighter conquering. You know, it's kind of
Yeah.
a good motto. But in terms of religion, I didn't really do that for religious reasons. I
No.
came to religion kind of after that, when I was in a roundabout way through history. So I'm really interested in history, really interested in genealogy. So I actually work on the side as a genealogist. That's what I've been doing today all morning. So I'm really interested in that. And it's through history and genealogy that I started learning more about religion. And then the more I learned about religion, and then I started to understand how basically the main three Abrahamic religions all have the same root, and you start to see similarities rather than different. Everyone's pointing out differences. Your average person on the street doesn't realize how these religions are linked together. So the more I start to see that, I was like, people need to know about this. People don't understand this. And then that also ties back into martial arts, because one of the best things about running a martial arts club or going to a martial arts club is you are on the mat with all kinds of people. There's people there. I always used to joke because there was a top inspector from the police on the mat, and I used to jog around in the warm up and say, "Isn't it great that we can have drug dealers and police officers all on the same mat together?" And
It
these,
is like
these
that as well,
guys,
isn't it? It literally is
yeah,
like that.
yeah, because you've got these rough guys from estates. I mean, you've got all these different people. You've got people who might be well off. They're all on the same mat, so there's like different cultures on the mat. You've got Muslims, Christians, atheists. You've got all these people mixing together, and yeah. So on the mat, we've all got this common goal, and we're all helping each other and stuff. But when we step away from that, we've all got these separate lives and separate beliefs and stuff. So yeah, for me, religion's about seeing the similarities between the religions and between people, and yeah, it's that for me. That's the most interesting thing, is because I believe the Bible. I read the parts of the Bible every day. I think the Bible is. Most people see the Bible as like a allegorical storybook that teaches you moral lessons about things, which it does. But there's also lots of like real history in there. Like I think it's probably one of the greatest history books that we have access to in the modern world. So yeah, so I'm really interested in that, and how it all links together.
Yeah, it's incredible. I remember it was during. I mean, I've grown up religious all my life, but it's one of those things where I had to take ownership of it myself, because it can't just be your parents telling you go to church or whatever. I mean, most of my
Yeah,
friends that I grew up with don't go to church anymore. But I remember during the pandemic, I really got serious about reading the Gospels, in particular, the words of Christ, and it really changed my life, actually. It really deepened my faith, and the values of it as well, the values that come from that otherwise aren't there, because otherwise everything is about money, sex, and power, essentially. If you break it down, what the human, what we're aiming for, what we're going to, it can become very, very reductive very quickly if we don't have any sort of transcendent values. And I know there are other ways of that people look at it to connect with God or the universe, whatever they call it. I get that, but it can get quite reductive quite quickly, can't it?
yeah, that's it. Like you say, there's different, because you've got spirituality and religion as well, and you've got kind of everything in between. But again, I think like martial arts is like going to church. You go into this you go into this group of people, and you're all striving for this common goal, and so I think people could learn a lot from both things, religion and martial arts, and like yeah, I think that again the values from that you learn from martial arts are similar to the values you would learn, respect, self-discipline, all these things. They are very parallel, I think. So yeah, that's what I like to look at, is like the similarities between the two. But you got to think back in the day, we was God fearing, and people didn't commit crime and didn't do certain things because they feared the punishment of God. And I think now that people don't fear that it's just turned into lawlessness. So
Well, that's the point, and that's a good point, because it's not to say that there wasn't any crime in the past, but it's that there are many more people who didn't commit crimes because of the fear of God, so to speak, because they believed that they were not just accountable to the people around them and whether or not they got caught, but there was a higher being that was gonna call them to account, if not sooner, then certainly later.
yeah, and I mean, with all the things that are happening in the world right now, you know, we I don't know what your beliefs are on this, but it's like, if you start looking at end times prophecies, a lot of things are happening now that you could attribute to those end times. We could be close to something like that happening. So
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, I was up on Saturday night and I was doing some work on my business, which I do on the side of my day job, and I was in my office and the missus had gone to bed and it was just me, and I was looking at all this stuff about Iran and Israel and goodness knows what's going on now. I'm thinking, wow, this is really interesting. If you look at it from a sort of an eschatological point of view, which is, talking about the end of days and everything else, from that point of view, there's some interesting things going on. I'm not saying anything proves anything, but the parallels and the rhyming and the chiming that's going on at the moment with world events and what's written in the Bible is very, very interesting indeed. And, people take it seriously or they don't. I just know how it works in my life. And I've had so many experiences, like you say about. I mean, I read scripture every single day. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, known as the Mormons, and I read the Book of Mormon every day, and I also read the New Testament in the week as well, particularly the Gospels, to get me on the right track. Because this again, like you say, going to martial arts is like going to church, and you have to be reminded of things. You have to be reminded of basics. One of the trainers at the gym I go to, he talks about the basics all the time. He's kind of an old school guy. But he says, I'm not into all this spinning on your back nonsense. I'm not into that. I'm into the basics. The basics of what have worked for me. He's a black belt in BJJ. He's black belt in judo, and he's got other strings to his bow as well. He says it's the basics for me that really matter. And that's the thing that we need reminding of again and again, because I think to myself, these things can be, power can be seductive, for example. If you think about martial arts, one thing that really struck me was, I think this was a couple of months ago. I It kind of clicked for me in a certain way, and I did have this moment where, for like probably the first time in BJJ, I was actually dominating somebody in the round, and thought, wow, yeah, this is a change. I'm actually doing it. I'm dominating someone. He's been coming longer and all the rest of it, and I felt pretty good about myself. And you realize that can be seductive. That feeling of superiority can be seductive. And I had to check myself, like, no, 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 that's not what it's about. Not about being better than other people. It's about being better than who I was before. But it made me think, like, guys like you who are black belts and have got all this experience really know how to handle yourselves, really, really confident. It must be tricky for you to stay grounded. Like, how do you do that? How do you not become seduced by the power that you have in your craft, in your martial arts? Is that part of where the religion comes into it as well?
yeah, there's actually, you'll know better than me, but there's actually a verse in the Bible, and I think it says, "Those who those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." And that
Yeah,
that
exactly.
that explains it perfectly. So, yeah, I think you have to constantly just humble yourself,
Yes.
because if you don't, you'll be the one getting humbled. And yeah, I think that pretty much explains that when I read that again, I'm not sure where the verse is from, but I remember reading that and just thinking, yeah, that is true. Like, it's easy to be a black belt and to
Mm,
just become a bully and just be able to destroy people. It's a little bit
yeah.
like reminds me of Star Wars. The good and the bad side of the Force.
Totally. Totally.
So you've got this power, you've got this force that you can use. Like, you can be humble with it and use it for good, or you can just try and destroy people. But ultimately, if you're um, yeah, if you're using it like that, if your ego gets too big, you're gonna get humbled. And yeah,
Mm,
I think that's the thing as a black belt. You have to be confident. You've got to be confident in your skills, because confidence plays a big part of it. But at the same time, you've got to know that there's always someone around the corner who's got your number.
that's it. There's always a bigger bully. If you're going to play the bullying game, then there's always a
Yeah,
bigger bully, and that's the thing. I love that verse of scripture actually. In fact, and for the life of me, I can't remember the exact reference right now, but I was on this conversation with a friend recently at church about that very thing, that those who vaunt themselves, those who put themselves up, they're gonna be abased. And so it's a choice, isn't it? You can either stay humble yourself through your own choice and the way that you choose to live your life, or someone else is going to come around and do it for you, and it's pretty painful when that happens. I've had it in not with BJJ. I've not been doing it long enough, and I'm pretty humble anyway. I've got nothing to brag about in that domain, but in other domains, I've had that, growing up in life, and you realize actually, we're all figuring things out to a greater or lesser extent. Nobody's got anything 100% licked or figured out. We're all
Yeah.
we're all here we're all here to learn and to grow and to develop. And ultimately, for me, it's about contribution. It's about, you know, learning isn't an end in itself. It can be interesting, it can be fun, but it's what am I going to do with this? Like, one of the phrases I use is learn, create, contribute. So first of all, your basis is in your learning. What is it that I'm learning about? What is the skill base that I'm putting together? From that skill base, what is it that I can create? Like you've done with your gym. You've done all this learning, but you've used that learning to create this gym and this you've built your house, so to speak. And then that is your contribution. So through the thing that you've created, it's now making a contribution. You don't even have to be there. Other people have been given responsibilities to fulfill to make sure that works its way out. And I think I suppose that is the gospel in many respects. If I look at it like that, I think it should be. Religion has been criticized in the past, especially Christianity, for being life denying rather than life affirming. I do not believe that whatsoever. I've read a lot of Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy on this, and I think it's dead wrong in the sense that the most life affirming way of looking at life is perhaps through the lens of Christ, because he is the one who carried his cross and he fulfilled his mission, and he was an absolute individual in his time, going against the grain, making the contributions that only he could make to serve other people. But that is the most life affirming thing that you can imagine. There's nothing more life affirming than that, because he didn't fit in with the herd. He didn't just go in with the herd. And I think that's the challenge for Christians, is that it is easy to fit in with the herd. It is easy to just become comfortable in a social milieu and in your environment, and you've got your friends, and we've got our same beliefs, and we're going to kind of batten down the hatches and stay together. But actually, we're not necessarily supposed to do that. We're supposed to be a city on a hill, right? We're supposed to be the salt of the earth and to go out and to make things better in the situations that we're in, not just to kind of cluster ourselves together and stay away and be scared of all the big bad things that are happening. We're aware of the challenges and evils of the day, so to speak, but we're out, we're active, we've got our eyes open, we're contributing, we're serving other people, we're making other people's lives better. So I think what you're doing is awesome, and I love this. I love this crossover. I say to more and more people at church, I feel like I preach the gospel of martial arts when I'm at church sometimes, because sometimes people mistake weakness for meekness and vice versa, and it's not the case. I think the meaning of the word meekness in Hebrew is sword sheathed. So it's the idea that yes, I've got a sword that can do damage, but I
I'm not
choose to
going to
keep it
use it.
sheathed.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that's my choice. If you're weak, you don't even have the choice. You can just get absolutely battered. You can get dominated or whatever without having a choice. But if you've got a sword, you can use it when you need to use it.
Yeah, definitely. I was talking recently to a friend of mine who's a black belt as well, and yeah, he's a man of God. He's called Chris Crossan from up in the northeast, and yeah, he was talking about like people see Jesus now as this weak guy who just kind of let people do whatever. He was a victim, but really Jesus was like he was a warrior. He was like you say, he went against the grain. He was a powerful guy. Um, and then you look at things like the Crusades, like one of the things we was talking about is like being a crusader. You're being a warrior. You're not just laying down and letting people, just letting the world go to pot kind of thing. So yeah, there's definitely two sides to it, two ways you can look at it. But that's why I'm really, again, I come to that through history, looking at the Crusades, and looking at, like, I really like the Old Testament because of the genealogies and stuff in the Old Testament. There's a lot, like Genesis is basically a genealogy. Um, so that's really cool. So that really got me interested in that. That got me hooked in. But yeah, there's lots of parallels between genealogy, history, martial arts, and religion, which is sounds like a weird combo, but that's basically my life right now.
No, I love it. I love it. I love this conversation, Danny. We could go on all day, except we can't. We have to wrap it up now. I appreciate and respect that. I
Yeah.
think just as a closing thought, if I may, just on the conversation with you today, I think of a phrase, and I don't know who originally said it, but it's all truth may be circumscribed into one great whole. All truth may be circumscribed into one great whole. And I think there is so much truth in that in itself because we get these principles in the Bible, we get them in religious texts, we get them in science, we get them in martial arts, we get them all over. We can find them wherever, and they all fit together. That's the beautiful thing about it. And it's about discovery, it's about embracing goodness, it's about embracing truth, and it's about having good intentions to others to make that contribution to the world. So Danny Mitchell, thank you so much for your time on the Real Clear Values podcast.
No worries. Thanks a lot. And yeah, if anybody's watching, I would advise you to go to church and go to jiu-jitsu class.
That's it. Maybe not the same time, but different days, eh?
Definitely.
Cheers, Danny.
No worries.